I've been posting hymns on the attributes of God, and yesterday was referring to just the idea of what I call top-down thinking, where we begin with God and come down to us and to our situation rather than work from our situation up to Him. And yesterday's hymn was a great example of that, in my view, where Ambrose starts to sing about God, His glory, His greatness, the worship of all the angels and saints in heaven, and then comes down to us, our worship and praise, and then closes with how we may approach Him as our Father, this great, glorious, infinite, transcendent being we may call Father, and in our need and situations ask for His help and His grace because we've been reconciled through His Son. So for me, that's the way we're supposed to live our lives. That's the order of the Lord's Prayer, as it's called. It begins with God, our Father, His glory, and gradually comes down to our need for provision, forgiveness, and deliverance. And I mentioned yesterday, in case somebody didn't see it who's looking today, this little book by Nick Needham on the early church fathers, which is a great introduction in terms of daily readings to their wonderful teaching about the nature and being of God. And this is the diet that their congregations and their worshippers lived on week by week and sometimes day by day, because preaching on a daily basis was very, very common in the early centuries, as it was in the Reformation. So today's hymn is another hymn by Ambrose, and this is one again about God's eternal light, His radiance, the sun, he calls it, of truth and love, the radiance shining from above. And it's really top-down thinking. He starts with God, but then he comes quite quickly to our prayers then ascending to Him. And then he mentions specifically some of the prayers that we would bring to God. But having said that, then he finishes with the last verse, which is all praise to God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so prayer is mixed up. Our needs, our petitions are mixed up with this top-down thinking that ends up coming right up to God and His glory and His worship. Today's hymn is a good example of how I approached the Dulham's Cave music, because what I've tried to do initially for my own devotions has been to find tunes that I can use to a number of different hymns. So when I come across a hymn, for instance, that's written in long metre, then I take a tune that I use for another hymn in long metre, and then I'm able to sing that one straight away. And so part of the goal in the Dulham's Cave Music Project is to get a range of tunes that will fit virtually any hymn that you're liable to find. And one of the most exciting things in my life is discovering new hymns that I hadn't seen before, and new treasures in these hymns, and fresh ways of expressing my own devotion to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I'm saying that because this tune is exactly the same tune as I sang the hymn to yesterday. So you may well be picking this tune up because I've used it a number of times. Splendour of God's own glory bright, from light eternal bringing light, O light of light, the fountain spring, O day, all days illumining. Come, very Son of truth and love, eternal radiance from above, and shed the Holy Spirit's ray on all we think or do today. Likewise our prayers to you ascend, Father of glory without end, Father of to conquer in temptations on. Teach us to strive with all our means to overcome the devil's schemes and turn to good whatever's ill, and thus our calling to fulfil. Strengthen our will to do what's right, and let us not in sin delight. Let faith her eager flame renew, and hate the false and love the true. And so to you our prayers ascend, our Father glorious without end. Your sovereign grace let us impart, to conquer in temptations on. All praise to God the Father be, and to the Son and Spirit, three in one, the God whom we